Hello and welcome to another devlog of the ruins of Aereal. So, what have I been up to this time? Well, a lot of polishing really, and a lot of bug fixes as well. Some nice things to be added to the game. So the first thing I noticed a while back was that when setting creatures on fire, those fire effects didn't really work always that well. So when starting the fire, everything went well, but for example, when extinguishing the fire didn't go out, and while the creatures were on fire and we went back to the menu, for example, we went back to the island, the fire effect, the burning effect, you could still hear it in the background. Um, and also the location of the fire where the creature was not 100% okay. So this is something I've been tweaking recently. So let me start up like some intermediate combat definition here with let's say a random deck, but I'll just adjust that random deck so I have some more for example, this incineration scroll. Let's add more incineration scrolls. Remove some that I don't like here. I don't care about poison and stuff like that. Alright, let's add some more incineration scrolls. That's it. Alright, so I accept. And then I'll read with Realia. And okay, this is great. Two random ones, right? Okay, so let's start that game. So that's the second thing you see here. The second thing I've added is that there are also tips when starting a battle. So up until now, it was just a black screen. And now there are also tips. So we can see that there are 3 enemies here, and you can set them all on fire like that. So I've changed the code that whenever one dies, I'll check if there is still at least one fire burning, and I'll keep the fire burning effect. You can hear in the background, you'll keep it active. So right now you can really hear it. So let's crank up the volume of the sound effects a little bit. So here these fire effects are burning. Alright, so another thing I did, and let me start, what is this? Let's see here. Another thing I did, that's a little bug, but I'll fix it. Let's do something like that. Instead of a scorpion skeleton, for example, start.
Fight.
That's interesting. So let's set on fire again. So in the background you can hear the fire effect. So whenever I kill one off, like that, the fire effect keeps on going, because really there is at least one fire still active. So that's one of the things I did. And also what I did is, I'll just end my turn here.
Enemy turn. Your turn.
And another thing I did is that when playing those cards too quickly after one another, there was a bug that if I played it, for example, I play a 2 card, so this means this energy will diminish by 2. Then if I was very quickly, I could play another 2 card, because using the queuing mechanism wasn't entirely finished yet. While doing the sequences followed by the incineration card, for example, the sequences set fire to the first enemy, set fire to the second enemy, for example. So there could be 4 enemies to be set on fire. And the decrease of the energy was only taking place at the end of that sequence. So that means that if I was fast enough, I could issue a new card command before the end of the sequence. I could go negative here. So that's why I disable cards right now while the sequence is executing. So let's do that. So we have something to play here. So this one will be able to play after doing the incineration card. Look what happens. I play the incineration card, and I cannot play something. See, I was dragging the cards around, but it didn't work because the cards were actually disabled. They were disabled as in they were grayed out, like this incineration card here is grayed out right now, but you couldn't, they were just colored, but you couldn't play them anymore. So that essentially takes care of that issue. So a very important issue which I struggled a lot with, but that's really what happens here. So another thing I noticed is that if you had a lot of enemies drawn on your screen when starting the battle, the fade in of the green would happen, and then the enemies would be placed one by one in there, and that is because the creation of the enemies is based on the queuing system, and the fade in is just on start of layout. So if there is a lot in the queue, for example, creating a lot of enemies, that would result in the enemies still being created while the fade in was happening. So that's something also which I changed. Actually, the fade in is now being done in the queuing mechanism. So another thing you can notice maybe here is the changing of the color of the staff. So this is also the changing the hue of the staff as we go along here. You can see that it randomizes the colors as it goes along in time. So how do I do all of these things? Well, for the fire effects, for example, let me go to the enemies. For the fire effects, I have in the enemies, I have added the fire X offset, fire Y offset, and the fire scale. So depending on the enemy, I will start the fire effect, and it will take into account fire X, and Y offset. So a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, sorry, and a little bit up, and 3 times the scale of the effect itself. So this is for the ghost. For the werewolf, that would be these settings. 004. For the imp, it would be -30, 2.5, and 0. So that's what would happen here, and that's what changes the effect of the fires of X essentially. So disabling these cards is actually done by using the disable card. So let's search for disable card. Yeah, I have this function disable card, and it's already being used in quite some places, primarily in the card event sheet here, where I do the rearranging of the cards. So based on a number of things, for example, of the card cost and the unplayable setting of the card, I will disable a card, for example. But I added some functionality to the function disable card. You'll see that it also has apply grayscale. So what I did here, on top of that, I have this disable hands cards command function. And in this command function, I will just disable all of the cards in the hand. So I pick the cards, current deck is T from table. It's not destroying and it's not being the drag one. So I disable all of these cards, but I set the apply grayscale to 0. So that means everything on my hand is still colored, but I cannot handle it. It's the drag drop function is disabled. And I have exactly the same thing for scrolls, by the way. So there's also a risk that a scroll can be played. So I have disabled hand scrolls. Exactly the same thing. All scrolls that are not loot, that are not being dragged. So one of the extra things here I also have is the start fade in. This start fade in, this used to be on start of layout, of course, and now there's a start fade in command from the command queue, which is being issued after all of the enemies have been created, of course. So that starts the fade in, and you can see of course, you can see the hint when the fade in happens and stuff like that. So that's also something I changed. So if I now go to the effects here, you'll see how the hueing changing of the staff exactly works. So just like I have an effect like the bat cycle. So if you remember, if you're following my devlog for quite some time, you'll see that I've implemented some bats. So that means one in so many seconds, there will be bats flying around, starting from somewhere on the screen. And this is actually a cycle of timers that run every so many seconds, and once the bats have completed their run, another timer will start. So it's a cycle. The same cycle starts here for the staff, but it will be much shorter. You see here the bat cycle is like 5 plus random 60, so and the worst case is like more than a minute apart. So here the staff cycle will be very rapidly cycling, and you'll see here on the staff timer I will determine a new color value, and it's a random of 100. Why? Because the Huey value is determined by a effect, the set HSL effect. The set HSL is the H for HSL stands for Huey. You can set it from a value from 0 to 100. So changing that towards another value, what I'll do is I'll tween a value from the last color what it was saved to the new color, which I determine here, and then do it in 2 seconds. And then I start a new timer. It's like a cycle again. So whenever that finishes, I'll put this new color in the last color. And then the next time the stuff timer fires, I'll pick that last color and then start going to a new one. So it goes from blue to yellow, from yellow to orange to whatever color. Whatever color is randomized here. Yeah. And also this tween here, while it is playing, I'm just setting the effect for adjust HSL. The first index is the Huey, and I just take the value of the color staff tween. So that's essentially how it works. Pretty simple for setting that. All right. So what I've also done, and let me just go to the main menu here. And let me go to continue the journey. I've also added these options here. So this option now goes to a separate screen where you can change the volume of the music and the hints, etc. There was a pesky bug, by the way, that these things didn't get saved all along, these checkboxes. So this is now done as well. So that's a pesky bug fix. And the last part of the polishing I did was adding some extra music. So what you're hearing now in the background is one of the extra music tracks. I already had 8 or 10 music tracks for the battle, and now I've added 8 music tracks for the menu as well. So whenever you go into the menu, you can hear a random music track from the menu. So let's see here in menu, you'll see here battle and menu, and it runs randomized basically for when you start a battle, can be battle 4, battle 6, battle 7, whatever, and we go into the menu, can be menu 0, menu 4, menu 3, whatever. So what I also did is you might have noticed in previous dev vlogs that when going from the battle back to the map, that the menu, the battle sounds, the battle music of the battle was still playing. So I just changed that it's going back to some music from the menu, which is mostly darker music and slower music actually. And the last thing I did was changing the sounds of the monsters. So the monsters each have an attack sound, but they should also have attacks sounds when they get attacked. So the werewolf already had that, but all of the other monsters didn't have that yet. So if I go back to the enemies here, you'll see that I have this sound set 1, set 2, set 3. For this large spider is now set to set 4. And you can see here set 4, there are up to 5 sets right now for a monster. And all of these sets are different types of sounds specific to one or another monster. You can see that here. So there can be some randomization here. So what happens is when the monster gets hit, automatically it will play one of these sounds according to the set it is configured with. So set 4, when this monster gets hit, it will play one of those 8 sounds really. The way it knows that there are 8 sounds here and 9 sounds here and whatever 14 sounds here is in the configuration file. You can see here in the configuration file I've added 5 more configurations saying, okay, in the first set there are 14 possibilities, in the second set there are 10 possibilities, etc. So it'll do that automatically really. So that's it. Quite some extra polishing for Runes of Aerial in this episode. So I hope you liked it. As always, please like and please subscribe, and see you next time.